So I think I was very wrong with my initial reaction to 293. So obviously, spoiler warning if you're not already caught up, but there's been quite a lot of discussion about whether or not Isagi's last goal was plot armor or not. And the very first thing I want to say is that obviously all stories have a kind of direction they're going to go. You know, One Piece is about Luffy finding the One Piece and becoming king of the pirates, and Blue Lock is about Isagi becoming the greatest striker and Japan winning the World Cup. And it's not by default plot armor when these things happen, or you could see it as a kind of like acceptable level of plot armor because it'd obviously be a bit awkward if these things didn't happen. As long as the journey there feels believable and has setbacks and, you know, other characters don't just randomly act in weird ways to the MC's benefit or are like suddenly nerfed in the middle of a match, then it's cool, right? It's honestly what you want from a story the vast majority of the time. Now, that last example of a character suddenly being nerfed is the main argument I've seen for this goal being like plot armor, right, in the case of Itoshi Rin. And I initially somewhat thought the same, you know, but now I've had some time to process it all, think it all through. I think I've really changed my mind on this, like completely. So at the end of 292, Rin is marking Isagi quite closely, and we know that Isagi does not have the physical specs to escape Rin if he's keeping his focus on him. You know, he's stronger than Isagi, he's faster than Isagi. If Rin is really gunning for him, he's gonna need something external to get away from him. And of course, the ball falls to Alexis Ness. And obviously, who is Rin going to turn his attention to as soon as that happens? Who is everyone going to look at the second Ness gets the ball? Kaiser, right? And I'll come back to that, but before the pass goes through, we see Shido blocking Kaiser. And after it's revealed that Ness passed to Isagi, we also see Shido marking Kaiser. But in between those two panels, we don't see him at all. Isagi and Kaiser are both in this area somewhere, but we only see the player behind Rin and Shido, who's obviously revealed to be Isagi. So Kaiser was kind of missing in these panels because we can see that he's not behind Shido here. And obviously that's because these panels are from Ness's point of view. And I thought this was a really nice callback to his original backstory where he doesn't see the like real world as such, the kind of scientific world of his parents. Instead he sees his own like magical fantasy world, right? Which is why it looks like Rin is almost just barging into Shido, but in reality, Kaiser is somewhere in there too, right? But Ness doesn't see that, he just has this image of the greatest striker getting past them, which is why things play out the way they do. And hopefully the author will clarify all of this next chapter, but where I'm going with this is that it doesn't really feel like plot armor that Isagi was able to escape Rin, like not at all. Because I think Rin realised too late that the pass wasn't going to Kaiser. And by that point, Isagi was able to get himself around Kaiser and Shido to block Rin from being able to catch up to him. As Isagi spoke about earlier, he was able to be the fastest responder to the change in the field. And this seems to be the way the series is setting up for the, way that a talented learner can be a genius. But this has also been the only way to defeat Rin since the second selection. If we go back to the 4v4 match, virtually every single goal was the result of something new that he wasn't aware of being used against him. Nagi's two-stage volley, Barrow stealing the ball, Isagi's back heel volley, and that's kind of like the genius way of defeating Rin. Although, I don't know if I'd call, stealing the ball of your teammate genius, but anyway. But the final play where Isagi responded faster to Batra's awakening than Rin is extremely similar to this goal. This kind of the talented learner's way to defeat him. And it also builds on Isagi's goal at the end of the first selection, where he realised that his actions can't give people enough time to catch up to his thought process. And that's kind of the first time he overcame a genius in the form of Nagi. And obviously he's now taken this further, and there's also that bit in the 4v4 where Rin is the first to respond to Tokumitsu being less tired than everyone else, and was able to get a goal off of that. And that was also quite similar to this. Everyone else saw one player a certain way, but there was one guy who realised something before everyone else and was able to exploit that. And as a side note, I actually think the whole talented learner genius thing will be more of a spectrum than just like binary categories in future, but that's not for this video. Now, there are of course a few further questions that I'll come to, but I really like how this isn't really a one and done victory from Isagi. You know, he's not guaranteed to win against these guys the next time he plays against them, because their technique and their physical attributes still, you know, completely outclass him. He'll have to do something similar next time, you know, adapting faster to the change. So I really like the way that this goal both builds on earlier concepts from the series and also allows Isagi to lose more in future and have it be believable. Because, you know, obviously there's always that pattern of Isagi doing extremely well, and then at the beginning of the next arc he kind of just seems to regress a bit until he figures some new stuff out. But more on that in a moment. The last couple things in that, firstly, Kaiser and Ness's behaviour made complete sense to me personally. I've seen some people say otherwise, but you know, the years of manipulation Kaiser has drilled into Ness, him simply making this pass the way he did was already a pretty big step for him. You know, and also Kaiser kind of dropping his being able to see himself as just a peace thing made a lot of sense to me too. You know, in his flashback he talks about how his football would always come back to him. No matter how much he took his anger out on it, no matter how much he treated it, it was always guaranteed to return. And obviously as he grew older, Ness essentially took over that role for him, you know, which is a bit dark, but... And so the idea of that suddenly changing, combined with the panic of, oh, if he does something else, you know, I might not score here, and we know that to him that means he's essentially worthless if he doesn't score in his eyes. I can see how all of that combined was enough panic for him to not remain level-headed. You know, sure, he kind of briefly overcame it earlier, but can't really escape all those years of trauma that easily. All of this is to say that I think this goal makes a lot of sense. You know, personally, I don't think it was plot armor. You could argue that it was maybe predictable instead, right? But I certainly don't think it was plot armor beyond the level of just main characters doing main character things. Right? And actually, on that note of it being predictable, this is something I kind of said to myself, right? You know, oh, that was kind of predictable, Isagi scored again. But if I actually go back to before this game started, you know, it's been a year, so I kind of forgot this. I remember thinking it was really cool that the author had set this up so we weren't really sure either way who was going to win. Obviously, most of us expected BM to win, but I don't think there was anywhere near as much certainty as there was with, say, the U20 match, where it's like, yeah, obviously they're going to win, because otherwise Blue Lock doesn't exist anymore. So, whilst yeah, it felt more likely that BM was going to win, I think there was always enough of a possibility of PXG winning that it was never really predictable to me. You know, there's like a difference between the two. I'm sure there's people out there who did feel 100% certain BM would win, but not me. And I think a good number of people were the same. You know, so it's not really fair for me to go, oh, well, the most likely outcome happened, so yeah, I knew that from the start. Because I was never really 100% sure. You know, same with Isagi getting the winning goal. You know, going into this, we all knew Rin, Shido, Isagi, Kaiser, we're all going to get a goal each and it'd be 2-2. But there wasn't really any certainty on who was going to get the last one. You know, obviously, yeah, Isagi was the most likely option. But I think there was always enough of a possibility of someone else getting it, you know, even someone random like Kunigami or Ness, that I don't think it was ever predictable. You know, I don't think it's fair for me to retrospectively go, well, the most likely outcome happened, so it was predictable. You know, hopefully that makes sense, the distinction I'm trying to make here. Sure, the most likely outcome happened, the main character scored, but I don't think that automatically means it was predictable. I think it was very well set up to not be predictable. However, and this is going to lead into a bit of a rant at the end, which will probably lose me a couple hundred subscribers on how I think a lot of people almost act like Kaiser online, right? So I'll come to that, but I do completely understand the opposing view. I can completely understand why people think Isagi getting the winning goal again is a little bit repetitive. And whilst I've been fine with it in the NEL, because it's only really been like 2 games, I do hope that trend doesn't continue into the U20 tournament. Like, I don't want every single game to just end with Isagi getting the winning goal. I also completely understand people who think Isagi has grown a bit too quickly and has gone from struggling to make an impact to basically being next gen 11, right? Personally, I think this is just a bit of a, anime thing, and we've seen his progression step by step, so I'm personally fine with it, but I can understand why some people would have wanted it slower, and I would have probably been fine either way. And so where I'm going with this is, it's not just limited to the anime community. It's certainly not limited to just Blue Lock. But there's definitely been this growing trend within the anime world. And I saw so much of this in discussions around this chapter, where people can't stand the thought of someone having a different opinion on a manga to them. How many times have you seen someone say, oh, I thought this about this chapter, I just didn't like it. And someone automatically responds with, oh, you just can't read. Oh, you just don't understand. And it honestly seems extremely childish to me. Really, everyone who disagreed with it, everyone who dared criticize the story in the slightest, just didn't understand it. Really? So, like the examples before, someone could say, oh, they wanted to see more of the side characters in this match, right? Or that they think Isagi is going too fast. And you could say, okay, fair enough, but I disagree because XYZ. Fine, right? But what seems to happen a lot instead is, remember how Kaiser likes to tear people down because if they're a piece of shit, he's above them, so he has worth? People have this real superiority complex where they'll go, oh, you just don't have media literacy, or oh, they're just a fan of this series or this character, so they just don't count. It's almost as though they need to have a justification for why someone who disliked even a tiny part of their series just doesn't count. Not everyone is going to see every series, every chapter, every character the same way as you. And they're not wrong by default, they can just see the same series differently. Right, so someone might think Isagi getting the winning goal is repetitive. You might not, both are valid, right? And I found that as a creator that people want you to like 100% of a series. Even liking 99% and saying there was this 1% you didn't like isn't really acceptable. People absolutely lose their minds over that. And I'm not going to pretend to do that in these videos. If there's something I dislike, I will bring it up, right? And so if you don't like that and you just want to hear the 100% praise, then don't watch my videos, right? But anyway, hopefully you see the point of the rant I was making. It's pretty rare I see that sort of thing in my comments. It's more on other channels and Twitter and things. But yeah. Anyway, the whole point of this video was just to, I think now I've had a bit of time to process the chapter, I think it was extremely well thought out. There's an explanation behind everything that happened in there. And so I don't see any plot harm there. I think it was all very well executed, very well thought out by the writer as we've come to expect from him. Although personally, especially as we are now going to have the entire Blue Lock gang all together on the same team again, I would love to see the side cast get a bit more of a chance to shine in the next game or two. Maybe let Kunigami finally do something, as we've been waiting for a very, very long time. Anyway, I make a quick video on 294 when it comes out tomorrow. It'll probably be out on Wednesday. Tuesday isn't a great day for me because I've got volleyball training after work. So it'll probably be out on Wednesday, and I'll hopefully see you there for it.